Let's get to what's on all of your minds.
You have nothing? Can I just, I think we all got the statement from Glenn about
Yep.
the secretary. I just have a logistical question to start first. And
Sure.
it says that he's going to come back to DC to open the U.S.-China SNED. That's today, tonight? This is the dinner that he's going to come back
He'll be
for?
coming back later today. I don't have an exact time on his
I'm
arrival.
not looking for that. I just want to know, what is the opening exactly? Is it the dinner? Is that
I
the-
believe
was that
he
the
will be
opening?
here for the dinner this
And then
evening,
he's going to
yes.
go back to Boston?
We haven't determined when he'll go back. Obviously, we'll adjust the schedule as needed.
Okay, I'm just trying to figure out, so we don't know yet whether he's actually going to be at the regular, the business session of the, tomorrow.
The plan is
Tomorrow
for
and-
him to be there, but obviously we'll make changes as needed, and he'll go back to Boston as needed.
Okay.
And as we noted in our media note, if he isn't able to be at any of the
Right.
sessions, Deputy Secretary Burns will be there on his behalf.
Okay, so at the moment, the only thing we know for sure that he's going to be doing is the opening today.
Correct.
All right. Assuming no one has any other questions about his schedule, I'd like to go to Egypt.
Okay.
Where do we stand today? Is the situation, there's been a prime minister appointed, what's your reaction to that? And how goes the coup review?
Well, I don't have any updates on the second question you asked. The administration, we're continuing to discuss, and we're continuing to take the time necessary to review what's taken place and monitor efforts by Egyptian authorities to forge an inclusive and democratic process forward. As we do that review, as I mentioned yesterday, we will of course take into account the requirements under the law consistent with our policy objectives. And on the first question you asked, we've of course seen the announcement coming out of Egypt. As we have conveyed to all of Egypt's leaders, we want to see an inclusive government that addresses Egypt's many political, economic, and social challenges and builds, as well as building a greater consensus. This is part of the transition. They also announced, of course, additional steps regarding a constitution and elections, as I know you've
I got
seen.
two more things really briefly. The first is, yesterday you and the White House, and I think maybe also the Pentagon, all called on the Egyptian military to exercise maximum restraint. Do you think that they have done so thus far since making the call? Are you pleased with the actions of the Egyptian? Sorry, I almost said Israeli. Of the Egyptian military?
That's another important topic.
So-
We are not going to make a day-by-day analysis or evaluation.
Well, have you seen anything to suggest that they are not, since the call for maximum restraint, that they are not exercising maximum restraint?
Well, Matt, obviously we've expressed through the course of this where we've had concerns, including some actions by the military, and we'll continue to do that. Events are ongoing on the ground, so I don't have any updates as of the last couple of hours, but we'll continue to monitor, and as needed, we'll speak out when needed.
All right, so then the second one is, the last one for me on this, I think, is that, is it fair to say that the coup review will take as long as necessary for the provision in the law requiring an aid to be cut off, for that to no longer apply?
No, it is not. Will take as long as is needed to review the facts on the ground, review the steps that have been taken, review our legal authorities,
Okay,
and
so-
make an evaluation.
Okay, so several weeks or months from now, when the provision of the law no longer applies and there hasn't been, the review has not been completed, you will understand why I, and I'm sure others, will raise the question.
Well, I'll look forward to discussing in
Okay.
several months, but it's only been about 6 days here.
Jen, you didn't actually really answer Matt's question about what the assessment is of the plan laid out by the interim president. Could you give us that, please?
Well, we are of course encouraged that the interim government has laid out a plan for the path forward. The details of a path back to a democratically elected civilian government are, as we've long said, for the Egyptian people to decide. This process, the amending of the Constitution, which was referenced in the announcement, a referendum on that Constitution, parliamentary elections, and presidential elections should move forward with the maximum possible inclusion and consensus, and we're hopeful that will be how it happens. So there we are.
I mean, he's talking about, sorry, they were saying about 3 to 6 months. Is that time frame too long or too short?
We're not going to prescribe a timeline here. It's up to the Egyptian people to determine that, and obviously this announcement was just new in the last 24 hours.
Why are you encouraged?
Joe asked me about the announcement about...
I know, and you said that you were encouraged that they've laid out a path forward. Why are you encouraged by the path forward that they have laid out?
Well, we're encouraged that they laid out a path forward and the steps that entails. Of course, this needs to be implemented, and we have called for and encouraged that to move forward with the maximum possible inclusion and consensus, which, as we all know, is an important part of this being successful.
The Muslim Brotherhood, which of course won the last election, has already rejected this. Is that encouraging?
Well, I think, again, this is just a proposal of a plan, Arshad, and that's what's encouraging. Obviously, all sides need to participate in the process. We're encouraging all sides to do that, and we're taking it day by day.
Is it conceivable to, in your view, is it conceivable to hold parliamentary elections within 6 months?
Well, they've laid out their own timeline. We'll see how these pieces unfold, but we're not going to get ahead of the process and where things stand right now.
Why should the Muslim Brotherhood, which, after all, won an election, participate in a proposed election whose very purpose seems to be to ensure that they are not in power? Why should they take part in that?
Well, I would disagree with the second part of your assessment. Obviously, since the election, events have unfolded on the ground. You're familiar with the concerns expressed by millions of people in Egypt as it related to the rule of President Morsi. This was not happening in a vacuum without concerns from the Egyptian people. And so, of course, we will continue to encourage the Muslim Brotherhood, leaders from that group, to participate in the process. We know this is not going to be an easy process, but that's what we'll continue to encourage.
On the issue to designate or not to designate what happened as a coup, are you in talks with Senators McCain, Patrick Leahy, and others that insist that it is a coup and therefore consequences should be undertaken?
Well, we've, of course, we will coordinate, have coordinated, will continue to coordinate very closely with members of Congress, including those who have been most vocal. I don't have any specific meetings or calls. I'm happy to check on that for you. We have been, of course, in close contact and have heard from a number of these officials.
And I know I asked this yesterday. You're saying that you are in contact with all different political orientations and so on, assuming that you are in contact with the Muslim Brotherhood. Could you tell us how far have you gone along in trying to convince them or make them see the broader picture that this is really for the good future of Egypt?
Well, Saeed, that continues to be the case. I just don't have anything about the private conversations to read out for you.
Is it safe to assume that perhaps Ambassador Patterson is conducting these talks with the Muslim Brotherhood?
I think it's safe to assume that Ambassador Patterson is very engaged in this process, as are a number of other officials, but she's also engaged with a broad range of officials on the ground.
I guess, my question is that we know that, let's say, the Secretary of Defense is in touch with Sisi, or, you may be in touch with others in the government and so on. Who is in touch with the Muslim Brotherhood, and who is the counterpart?
Well, again, I'm not going to read out the specifics of that. We've read out the Secretary's calls. I know that the Defense Department and our friends over there have read out some of his calls. We'll continue to do that in terms of who's speaking with whom, but I don't have any other specifics for you.
And finally, just to follow up on Rashad's question, why shouldn't the Muslim Brotherhood consider that they have been robbed of this election? I mean, to use a great American electoral term. They were robbed.
Again, I would point you to the concerns and voiced views expressed by many Egyptian people on the ground that expressed concerns about the rule of President Morsi. It's again up to the Egyptian people to make these determinations, but we're in a different place than we certainly were just around the time of the election.
You maintain that the U.S. government is not taking sides here,
We do.
and you have no preferred outcome for who might win the parliamentary or eventual presidential elections. How do you answer people who, including many Egyptians, who feel that by the very fact that the U.S. government has not called for Morsi's, the democratically elected president who you referred to in the past tense yesterday, for his reinstatement, and your voicing encouragement at the path forward that entails a new election that would replace the results of the election that he and his party previously won, is in effect taking sides, and that you are basically taking sides against them?
Well,
How do you answer
I
that?
think we've seen it seen it accused of all ways, of all different sides that we're apparently taking. I can assure you that we're not aligned with or supporting any particular party or group. In the case of the arbitrary arrests of many members of the Muslim Brotherhood, we have expressed concern about that. We certainly believe, as we would in any country, that there must be transparency and due process and respect for the rule of law. I was simply stating what the fact is on the ground, which is that there were millions of people who expressed their concerns, and we believe the voices of the Egyptian people deserve to be heard. But in terms of the path forward and what the coalition will be and who will rule, that is up to the Egyptian people to determine.
And as a general principle, does the U.S. government believe that democratically elected heads of government who have not been constitutionally removed or impeached in accordance with their own laws should be allowed to serve out their terms?
Well, every case is different, Arshad, and certainly the situation on the ground in Egypt is unique. Certainly we support Egypt's transition to democracy. We know it will take time. We support efforts to continue to do that, but every situation is unique. Certainly the situation on the ground in Egypt is, and I'm not going to make a sweeping declaration.
So, but you don't, just to be clear, so you do not support allowing democratically elected heads of government who have not been removed constitutionally or impeached in accordance with their country's laws to serve out their terms. That is not a position the United States government will take.
Arshad, of course we support the democratic process, including the election of democratically elected officials, certainly. But what I'm saying, and I know you're asking this question as it relates to Egypt, is I'm not going to make a sweeping claim as it relates to a very unique situation on the ground.
But so basically your answer is that most of the time you support democratically elected governments, not all the time.
Matt, we certainly
Right?
support
Is that-
the democratic process. This is a unique situation on the ground. I'm not going to make a sweeping accusation
But
or a
then-
sweeping claim as it relates to the
But
situation on the ground in Egypt.
surely you see the twisted logic of the idea that you're not taking sides. Because, I mean, I don't see how anyone in the administration can be intellectually honest or can give this argument. If you haven't condemned the ouster of a democratically elected leader, you're taking the side of the people that ousted him or her. And that's just logic. I asked you the other day about syllogism. I mean, this is just pure, there isn't any other way to describe it. You can't pretend not to be taking sides when you have taken a side by not taking a stand against the unconstitutional removal of a democratically elected leader. So I guess my question is, you at least admit, or I would ask you to at least concede, that the administration has taken a side, which is the side of the millions of people and the millions of Egyptians who had problems with President Morsi. Is that correct?
No, we have not taken a side. We remain in touch with representatives of the Muslim Brotherhood. We want the process to be inclusive. That's what we've been encouraging as they determine the process for an interim government, select leaders for that, and move towards the other additional steps.
Were you able to get an answer to the question I asked yesterday about the last time there had been some contact with President Morsi?
Certainly not during these events. I'm not
So
aware.
the last time that you think or you know was the president's call a week ago?
I'm not aware of any other contact from this building since then.
And since we're talking about
No,
courts,
not
Did you check?
this is building, but.
Well, from the U.S. government generally, and
Yes.
did you check?
Yes, Arshad, I did check.
Did
Thank
you get an update on the secretary's calls?
I do, certainly.
I'm particularly interested to know if he thinks that he has a counterpart, a foreign minister counterpart in Egypt right now, and if he, whether he does or he doesn't, who he's been talking to. Has he also called General al-Sisi?
He has spoken with him, yes. He spoke with him yesterday. I'm not aware of a new call today. I mentioned some of the calls he made yesterday. I don't have any other additional updates beyond those and the ones that we read out this weekend.
Sorry, which calls? Which calls did he make yesterday? Could you?
Well, he spoke with El Baradei yesterday.
But also over the weekend, correct?
Correct, he did.
So El Baradei and El-Sisi yesterday.
Yes, that's correct.
and has he spoken with the Israelis on this issue? Has he been in contact with his Israeli counterparts?
He spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu this weekend, and we read out that call as well, or released the list of
Right.
that
I mean,
on
in the Israeli press, they're saying that there's been a lot of concern expressed from the Israeli side to the U.S. administration that they should not freeze the aid because they think it would go against the national security interests of Israel. Could you comment on that?
I'm not going to speak to private conversations or read out, the concerns expressed by any government, including Israel. Obviously, we've said, and I know the White House said, and we said from here yesterday, that we do not believe it's in the best interest of the United States to immediately change our assistance to Egypt. Of course, we're reviewing our obligations under the law. And we'll continue to consult with Congress on the path forward. But certainly, the concern about the reasons why we've given aid in the past, the security impact on Egypt, on the region, and the United States' own security interests are, of course, all issues that others have expressed as well.
But you won't tell us if the Israelis have asked you to not to
I'm
freeze
not
the
going
aid.
to speak on their behalf. It sounds like they've spoken out about
It would make sense
their concern.
If your interests are national security interests, it would also make sense that on the Israeli side they would also have some security interests in the region, particularly with what's been happening in the Sinai.
Well, I would just point you to them for any comments on the concerns they expressed.
On the aid situation, I believe the UAE has announced a huge $3 billion, which is double your aid package, and the Saudis are expected to contribute another $5 billion. Is this something that you welcome? This is to Egypt, to the whatever the government is that they have now.
Well, I don't know the circumstance of those particular aid packages, so we'd have to take a closer look at that. Obviously, there are a number of types of aid that the United States and others provide, including military aid, including economic aid, given the situation on the ground. But beyond that, we're obviously making an evaluation about our own aid, and I just made a pretty clear comment on where we stand on that at this point, even though we're reviewing it, and obviously other countries will make their own decisions.
$1 billion as a grant, and according to the newspapers,
Can you say that one more time? I'm sorry.
$1 billion as a grant, which the money which will be coming from the Emirates, and the $2 billion from Saudis is a loan, and $2 billion another loan by the Emirates, and they will be free to use all the money according to the news reports. As they want. I don't know the detail, but.
Okay.
But
Is there a question?
is it because you are sending $1.3 billion? It's a military aid, but this money is going through to the maybe civilian service because
Well,
they have
we
promised
provide
to,
different kinds of aid to Egypt as well. There is the military aid, but we also provide economic aid, as many countries do. So I just would have to take a closer look at the specific aid that's being provided, but certainly each country will make their own decisions, and we're doing our own evaluation about ours as well.
As a follow-up about not taking the side, according to the news report, also both sides are accusing U.S. to help to their enemies. I mean, isn't it weird? I mean, how do you how do you view this? The take of this both side to blame
Well,
US
I
to help
think
the other
that
side.
that may be a further point that we are not aligned with or supporting any particular party or group, which is certainly the case from here, and certainly that's how we are conducting our relationship and our business as it relates to the path forward.
To change that image if both sides are unhappy with the U.S. and they have deep mistrust with the U.S.? What is your way of changing it? I mean,
Well, obviously, the president, the secretary, and our high-level officials on the ground and here in Washington have been both in close touch with Egyptian officials, but as well as officials in the region, and we'll just continue to communicate what the truth is and what we're pushing for and what our principles are moving forward.
a Human Rights Watch yesterday has condemned the arbitrary arrests against the Muslim Brotherhood. They've listed at least names of 16 of the top leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt who were arrested, and they've asked for their release, and they've also condemned the crackdown on media in Egypt. I mean, if Human Rights Watch says so, knowing who they are, that means there is something wrong there. The way forward, the democratic process, the future plan in Egypt, do you think this is the right way to proceed with it? Is this going to lead to democracy in Egypt?
Well, I was critical yesterday, and I'm happy to be critical again, of course, of arbitrary arrests that have taken place. And our message has been clear that we want to see transparency. We want to see respect for due process and for the rule of law. And certainly that's where we would like to see the path moving forward. We'd like to see an inclusive process moving forward. And so I think we've been pretty clear on how we feel about those arrests.
Are you conveying this message clearly to the interim government in Egypt right now? I mean, are you making sure that they understand what this means?
We are conveying this message. Dana?
Follow up to my question yesterday, you said that you would get back to me about whether there are specific standards or procedures that the administration is looking at when analyzing whether what took place was a coup or not. Do you have a answer to that?
Well, let me make one thing clear that I think there's been some confusion about. The legislation that is applicable here, which is part of a provision of the appropriations bill, is not specific about a deciding authority. So this goes to Arshad's question yesterday. So I know this isn't exactly your question. I'm just trying to answer a few things that came up yesterday. And so the legal advisor's office, as I mentioned yesterday, of course, has a role to play here, and they're certainly very engaged in the process. And as part of that, they're taking a look at, by working with the policy team, on the events of what happened on the ground. In terms of what they're specifically looking at, I mean, you can look at, of course, the legislation itself, and that is available online. I'm sure we can find that for all of you, which is specific to this case. The legal advisors, the entire administration, as they look at the policy, and I think I said this yesterday, but is looking at the events that transpired last week, what's happening now, and where things are going moving forward. So all of those are factors as we look at how we're going to handle our policy.
And just as a follow-up, I'm sorry. Besides the fact that we give $1.3 billion of military aid to Egypt, what exactly does make the situation on the ground very unique from other coups? You have a democratically elected president that was ousted by a military, even though there was popular support. Hey, he's been put on house arrest. You have arbitrary detentions. What makes the situation in Egypt, besides our involvement, very unique from other coups and even popular coups?
Well, I actually wasn't at all talking about our aid to Egypt. I was talking about the fact that millions of people have voiced their concerns on the ground.
Right. But as I said yesterday,
Every
like in
case-
Niger, tens of thousands of people voiced their concerns
Sure.
on the ground. And the United States still had no problem calling it a coup, and it was very similar set of circumstances. So when you say
Well, you
that in
can't
Egypt
use-
it's very unique, I'm just asking
You
what
can't
is it
use
about it that's
any
very
particular case as a cookie cutter of any other particular case. We're taking the time to review this, which is common practice in any of these cases. I understand you have one particular example there, but we do take the time to review these when the facts on the ground and the situation warrants, and that's what we're doing in this case.
But what makes it very unique? Like you keep saying that this situation is unique. It's very unique from other situations. what in your analysis, obviously you've done some analysis if you're able to say that it's very unique, besides the fact that we give so much aid, what is making the situation very unique?
Well, clearly, and you know the history with Egypt here, but they've taken steps in recent years to move towards democracy. Obviously, that's going to take some time. They're moving through that path now. The large number of people who express their legitimate concerns on the ground, and certainly we have taken note of that and are looking at that, of course. And yes, of course, assistance and the role that Egypt plays in the region, the importance of the regional security there is also important. These are all not factors in the determination, but in terms of the uniqueness of the situation on the ground, all relevant pieces of that.
But in fact, the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961 has a cookie cutter approach to the usurpation.
Well, the
of
legislation
power,
we're talking about here is not that. It's the appropriations. It's a provision of the appropriations.
Okay, well, I assume. I mean, I think I know a little bit about the law because I read
I know
about
you
it.
do.
Okay, I read about it.
You educate me every day.
Well, in fact, it does fall under that. I mean, what has taken place is the usurpation of lawful power by military force.
Well,
I mean, how do you
all
define
I
that?
can tell you is that we're taking the time to review the situation on the ground. I don't have any updates for you. And of course, we're taking into account the requirements of the law. Go ahead, Arshad.
Yeah, so two things. One, you're right that the law does not specify who specifically within the U.S. government makes the determination. What is your view? Is it your view that the Secretary of State makes that determination, or is it your view that the President makes the determination, or I mean, who ultimately, where does the buck stop here?
Well, the decision hasn't been made yet, Arshad. Obviously, there's an interagency process, and
But who makes the decision? It seems a reasonable question.
well, I'm not going to read out for you what the final decision, who makes the final decision that hasn't been made yet. So there's ongoing discussion in the interagency process. Those conversations and meetings are ongoing. Obviously, the legal advisor's office here plays a significant role in evaluating and providing advice. The secretary, of course, is very engaged in this, as you know, but beyond that, I don't have a tick-tock for you on exactly the order of decision-making.
Well, why can't, I mean, it seems like a reasonable question to ask who ultimately makes the call here. Why are you not willing to give your interpretation of who ultimately makes the
Well,
call?
if I have an update on that for you, Arshad, I'm happy to provide it.
And then, unrelated, you talked about how, you could make available the law, but it's pretty easily available, and it doesn't actually specify definitions of a military coup or a decree or a coup d'etat in which the military played I think it's significant role. It's not defined. The specific factors are not defined, which I think is one reason why we are interested in what are the factors beyond, or any specificity on what are the factors that you consider beyond what happened, what's happening now, and where things might go. I mean, can you offer any more detail than that?
I can't. Those are the parameters that are being looked at.
Okay, and then last one for me on this, and forgive me if you were asked this before I came
okay.
in. Do you have any specific comment on the designation of Hazem al-Biblawi as the Prime Minister?
I did say something, I believe, at the top on that, which I can point you to, or I can repeat it to. Okay.
I'll dig it out.
Objection to this continued use by administration after administration of the cookie cutter approach. Surely you don't believe that all cookie cutters are the same shape and size,
I will find a
do
different
you?
phrase for you if you'd like.
Because not every cookie in the world is shaped the same.
Gingerbread cookies.
Maybe. I'm not a big cookie maker, but can it just see if we can find another phrase to use?
We will task that for tomorrow, Matt, for you. Sorry, go ahead, Catherine.
Do you have, I think it was asked yesterday, an update on the number of U.S. personnel in Egypt, the embassy update?
So I can tell you that, and I wanted to check on kind of what information I was able to provide publicly, of course. For obvious reasons, we don't provide actually the specific number, but I can say that they have ordered a departure of non-essential staff and families. So that is what has been underway.
So nothing, that was like last,
Correct. There's not a new update to that, but we're not going to get into specific numbers of who is on the ground. Obviously, the ambassador remains there, which I know you asked about yesterday as well.
Well, that's a specific number. One is a specific number.
also there are some protesters specifically outside the embassy. Your reaction to that, and has there been any physical damage to the exterior?
I'm not aware. I'm happy to check on that. Obviously, if you're asking as it relates to security, is that why you're asking?
Right.
Obviously, this is something that is evaluated regularly, and certainly in this case, evaluated, probably on a nearly daily basis. And if decisions are needed to be made, or if we need to make decisions, we of course make those decisions. And the last update on an official decision on staff is the one that I just referenced that was announced last week.
Yeah, I mean, you say you were encouraged by the formation of the cabinet and the steps taken regarding the transition, but we can see that the Muslim Brotherhood are not part of this process. What do you think it's why you are encouraged?
Well, what I said was we're encouraged that the interim government has laid out a plan for a path forward. And of course, any process moving forward must be inclusive and take the consensus into account. So it's all about how things happen moving forward as well, including having an inclusive process.
So assuming that the Muslim Brotherhood will participate one day or another.
Well, I think inclusive means all parties.
I have another question.
Okay?
Yesterday, Jay Carney said, well, you also condemned the explicit calls to violence made by the Muslim Brotherhood. And it seems that this, I don't know how to say it, the explicit calls to violence still going on and more is said. So how do you evaluate that? How do you see it today or in a different way?
Well, we are always concerned, obviously in this case, and how volatile and fluid the situation is on the ground, with any, not just calls to violence, but any incidents of violence, and we'll continue to condemn those and do that publicly and privately.
So, and then my last question, without going into details of the legality of it's a coup or not, or the uniqueness of Egypt, and I know it's a fluid situation. If you say, what are your main concern now about Egypt? Because everybody now we are discussing about it's a coup or not, Muslim brothers are participating or not. I mean, what are the main concerns regarding Egypt now, from your point of view? 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever.
Well, I don't know if it's concerns as much as it's what we'd like to see. We're certainly concerned about violence and violence that is ongoing on the ground, and we'd like to see steps toward an inclusive process. Obviously, the announcement of a plan for a path forward is a step, but steps need to be taken beyond that.
Jen, I have one
Oh, go ahead.
more question.
Hold on. Sure, go
If I
ahead.
may say, you said that you will condemn acts of violence when they occur.
Yep.
Did you yesterday condemn, or do you now condemn, the killing of more than 50 people by the armed forces? I don't
Well,
recall you're condemning that. I recall you're calling for maximum restraint.
yep, we are.
Do you condemn it?
Condemn the violence?
Condemn what is widely reported by many news organizations to have been the killing of more than 50 people yesterday in Egypt, most of them civilians, by the military. Do you condemn that?
Well, again, there's two separate questions in here, which is how this happened and what happened. There's going to be an investigation. We'll see that take place, and that will be soon underway, we hope. Of course, we condemn any acts of violence and the deaths of innocent civilians. I think I did that yesterday, but we'll look for the investigation to take place to unwind all the specific details on the ground.
So you don't feel like it's clear enough yet that some of the people who were doing the firing were the military against people who were not armed? You don't think that's clear yet?
I don't want to evaluate what may or may not be. Obviously, we've seen lots of reports. There are lots of reports coming out of Egypt. There'll be an investigation. We'll look forward to that, the results, and we'll evaluate those when they come out.
After Jay Carney's statement yesterday, do you consider that the Muslim Brotherhoods are behind the violence in Egypt?
I think we have been very clear in being critical of all incidents of violence. Obviously, we're looking at the situation on the ground is very volatile on all sides, but beyond that, I don't know that I have any further update for you.
Is anyone keeping track of the current status of President Morsi? I mean, his well-being, has he been, bodily harmed, whatever? I mean, how do you keep track of where he is now?
Well, we have not, of course, been in touch with him, as I mentioned yesterday. That still is the case. We've seen the same reports that you all have seen. We, again, of course, call for not just fair treatment, but in terms of arbitrary arrest, we're very opposed to those. We want to see transparency. We want to see respect for the rule of law, all in these cases.
Yeah,
but I don't have any update for you on his status.
My question
from
is,
here.
does his well-being really figure in the conversations that are ongoing now between, let's say, the Pentagon and their counterparts in Egypt?
I would send you to the Pentagon for that.
Well, what about conversations with Mr. Barade between the Secretary of State and Mr.
I don't have anything further to read out about their conversations than I've done.
Your voluminous guidance on this, does it say anything about whether the administration believes that President Morsi acted illegally violated Egyptian law or the Constitution?
That's not an evaluation we're making. Obviously, we have been calling for respect for rule of law here,
Right.
and any steps that need to be taken to evaluate
as
that.
far as you know, the administration doesn't think that there was legal cause for President Morsi to be removed from power.
We have not made any statement accusing anyone of him of illegality.
Okay, then why can't you say that? Why can't you condemn it if you don't believe that he acted in violation of his?
Well, again, Matt, I
Egyptian
pointed
law
yesterday
and
to what the
Constitution.
president said just a few days ago about the action,
Yes, but
his
not
arrest.
taking the advice of the President of the United States is not a crime. It's not a violation of Egyptian law or the Egyptian Constitution.
Oh, I'm referring to the president's comment where he was critical of the arrest. That's what I'm referring to, not other pieces of the statement.
Right, but as far as you know, the administration hasn't taken a position on whether President Morsi or ex-President Morsi, as he may not be known, violated either the Egyptian law or the Constitution.
I'm not aware of
You're
a legal position. Obviously, we've spoken in
No,
voluminous
not even
forums
a-
on our view
Yeah,
on
yeah.
what's happening in Egypt.
Okay, all right.
Trying to reach President, as you have said, well, you didn't call him past president, you just said he was the president, had been, but are you trying to reach Morsi?
Not that I'm aware of.
Why not?
Again, I think we're in touch with a range of officials, including members of the interim government, the opposition, the Muslim Brotherhood. That's who we're in touch with
Are
right
you
now.
concerned about his welfare?
Well, of course, Arshad. I think I was clear that we believe that respect for rule of law should be taken into account here in all of the cases of arrest.
Then if you're concerned about his welfare, then why aren't you trying to get in touch with him?
I don't have anything more for you.
Do you know of his whereabouts?
I don't have any update on that for you. Yep, we can move on.
Do you not want to move on? Do you not want to move on? I have an
Oh,
Egypt
okay,
question.
go ahead,
Sorry.
Nicole. Nicole
So, do you
hasn't
have
had
an
one,
Egypt?
so let her.
Okay, I just want to.
One of the factors of the determination about the coup, or I mean the
the-
timeline, how much the timeline is important in the determination of the administration about the coup.
I'm not sure. Do you mean how long it will take us to determine,
If,
or?
for example, the interim government promises that the next election and the constitutional change will be made within the next 6 months, would it be enough for you to?
I'm not
call-
going to get ahead of where we are in the process. As I mentioned, obviously, the steps taken moving forward are all being looked at as well. Go ahead, Nicole.
So I wanted to ask about the Muslim Brotherhood. If the administration wants them to take part in a democratic process for the second time, how do you expect them to do that if members of their leadership have been arrested and or detained and the person they back as a presidential candidate has been under house arrest in some place unknown? I mean,
Well,
how can they function under those
Again,
circumstances?
we have been clear about our views on arbitrary arrests and how we feel that has been handled. So moving forward, we are in touch. We have been in touch with members of the Muslim Brotherhood. We want them to be a part of the process moving forward.
My
We don't
question
think
is,
the
how can
process
they
will
be,
take
though?
place.
How can they
The
be?
process is going to take place over a long course of time.
Right.
So obviously, we believe that in cases where there were an arbitrary arrest, they should be released, and they
Have you
should be
asked
able
the
to
military
participate
to
in
do
the
that?
process.
Have you asked the
We've
military to do
said
that?
publicly that we don't support arbitrary arrests.
But have you
and we've
directly
made that
asked
clear.
them to release the leadership figures?
I don't
that
have
they've-
anything more on private conversations beyond that. Sure.
Can I go to the Taliban, please? Mm-hmm. The Taliban announced today that they're temporarily closing their office in Doha because of broken promises by the Americans and by President Karzai. Could you comment on that, please?
Sure. We've always known, Joe, that this would be a challenging process with bumps in the road. And we're trying to still move it forward despite the difficulty of the process. The opening of the Taliban office just a couple of weeks ago, of course, was intended to facilitate negotiations with the Afghan High Peace Council, as you know. We believe that misunderstandings that arose in the context of the opening should not stand in the way of moving forward on reconciliation if the Taliban wishes to do so, and we'll continue to support and reiterate our call for that process to move forward.
But how are you going to do that if they don't have a political office? Surely you've just gone back beyond square one, or back to square one again.
Well, obviously we know the office has been closed, as you said in your opening question here. But again, we're going to continue to work through the bumpy road, and we're hopeful that we can get it back on track.
So nothing is scheduled at the moment?
There's nothing scheduled to update you on at the moment.
Is it your understanding that the Taliban, that their reasons for doing this are purely related to their peak at not being able to use their sign and their flag, or is there something more substantive to it?
I don't want to do an analysis of their motivation
Well,
here.
the reason I ask is that, well, I mean, several of us spoke to a senior official last week
Mm-hmm.
who said that that was, in fact, the case. That,
Well-
that it essentially all boils down to the name on the sign
Mm-hmm.
and the flag, and that that you were hopeful that the closure wouldn't happen. Is that
Sure,
basically
certainly.
correct? All of that is correct?
That is correct, but if there are other reasons, I don't want to ascribe them on their behalf.
Okay.
And just staying in Afghanistan, there was a report in the New York Times this morning about the possibility that the United States is now saying it may instigate a zero option, which means leaving no troops behind after 2014, because talks have obviously stalled with the Afghan leaders. Is that your understanding of the situation?
I did read the story this morning, of course. We are committed, let me just bear with me here, just to give you a broad overview of our approach to continuing to support a fully sovereign, democratic, and united Afghanistan. We have been clear in public and in private, as have many of our allies and partners in ISAF and in the broader international community, that we do not intend to repeat the mistakes of the 80s and 90s, and that as the Afghans stand up, they won't stand alone. As you know, this is a decision that the president will make. He is still reviewing options from his national security team and has not made a decision about the size of a possible U.S. presence. He's considering a range of options, as you know, and we made that clear as far back as January. So any report stating a decision is being made, or has been made, I should say, is inaccurate.
But there is a zero option. That's one of the options still on the table.
That has been an option that has been on the table for quite some time.
So has it moved up the pecking order from number 1, 2, 3, 4? Has it become one of the
I
more
would
serious
point you
options?
to the White House for that. This is a decision the president will make. But my understanding is that any rankings or notion that a decision has been made are inaccurate.
Just for the record, the New York Times story did not say that a decision had been made. In fact, I think it went out of its way to say that a decision had not yet been made. So
Okay.
so when you're saying that any reports the decision had been made would be wrong, you're not referring to that report, right?
Well, Arshad, I think that was what the question was about, the New York Times story. No decision has been made. It was very forward about where a decision was leaning.
But it
So I
didn't
wanted
say
to
it.
make clear
Yeah.
that a decision has not been made. And again, I am doubtful that my friends over at the White House are going to confirm any rankings of orders, but this option has been on the table for some time, and the president's continuing to consider options being put forward by his national security team.
A report that said that there was a lean in a certain direction is wrong as well? Is that what you're trying to
Again,
say?
I would point you to my friends over at the White House for
In
any
other words,
further analysis.
You wouldn't deny it. Can I just ask you what you mean when you said, and I'm sure that there's some background there.
Well, let me just say one more thing here. That option has been out there for a long time.
Yes,
So,
but the 0 to 100 option is always, if you're considering all options, you're considering leaving no one, or you're considering leaving infinity, or however many people you have in the entire army. So, I mean, the range of options is always from 0 to 100, if you want to put it that way.
that's true, but
And
this
you're
is a
saying that
decision
there
the
is
president
no
will
leaning-
make. So, for any further
Okay, fair
clarification of that, I
enough.
send you over
Can
there.
I just ask you to say what you believe the mistakes of the 80s and 90s were when you say that we're not going to repeat the mistakes of the 80s and 90s in Afghanistan? What mistakes would those be?
Well, Matt, I think the clear point here is making sure that the Afghan people know that we stand with them, that we're going to support them, and that we're going to have a proper transition take place here.
Well, okay, but when you say the mistakes of the 80s and 90s, what mistakes are you referring to? And are you referring to American mistakes?
We're referring to how we're learning from the past to manage things
But
moving
you told
forward.
me just the other week that you didn't look in the rearview mirror. But that's neither here nor there. I'm just wondering, are these mistakes? These are mistakes that this administration is saying that previous administration, the Reagan administration, the first Bush administration, the Bush father administration, the Clinton administration, all made in Afghanistan? Or are you saying that the whole world made mistakes in Afghanistan? Or that the Afghans made mistakes in Afghanistan? What mistakes are you specifically talking about?
I'm not going to outline them. I will just tell you that
All
we're
right.
going to ensure the Afghan people know we stand with them.
Okay.
On
Can I-
reconciliation,
Well, for what it's worth, I think Secretary Clinton said when she was in office that, I think she said this publicly and I think several times, that she felt that the U.S. government had precipitously withdrawn from Afghanistan after the Soviets withdrew. Is that maybe what you were thinking of?
Thank you for your educational quote there, Arshad. I appreciate
Throwing you a
it.
lifeline is what I'm doing.
I
but
appreciate
you don't
it.
have
Thanks,
to grab
as
it.
always, for your contribution.
on the question of reconciliation, as you have just reiterated that it should go forward, but considering the 2014 drawdown and the upcoming Afghan presidential elections, how soon this reconciliation process should move forward? Is there a timeline that you want to be there?
Well, obviously, we would like to see, and this was clear as evidenced by our opening of the support for the opening of the office just a few weeks ago. Certainly, we would like to see a reconciliation process move forward sooner rather than later, but we certainly understand the bumps in the road that we have experienced.
But are you hopeful that in the face of continuing differences between the Afghan president and the United States and the bumps in the road, will this reconciliation process be able to achieve something before the Afghan presidential elections?
I'm not going to give a timeline. Obviously, we continue to be focused on it.
Real quickly on Snowden. You've seen, well, what's your understanding of his current status? Is still in the airport? You don't know?
That is our
Do you not know, and I don't know that you would have any way of knowing whether he has accepted any asylum offers or not. You don't? Is that correct?
I don't think we have a means of speaking on his behalf.
Okay. Then is it your belief that there is no way that the Venezuelan government or any other government could have misunderstood the messages that they are getting from the administration about what you want to see happen to Snowden? Is there any way that, to your knowledge, can you conceive of a way that any government that you've been in touch with on this case might misunderstand your position?
Well, given how often we've stated it publicly,
I mean,
in
private
addition to
conversations,
private conversations.
sometimes when you say something publicly, when you go in and say it privately,
No,
there's a
I
wink
don't,
and
Matt.
a
And I
nod.
actually have an update for you. I know someone asked yesterday about contacts with Venezuela, and we, of course, have been in touch at senior levels orally and in writing. Assistant Secretary Roberta Jacobson, John McNamara, who's the director of the Indian Affairs Office, have spoken with Charge Ortega. and to the Venezuelan ambassador to the OAS, Roy Chatterton, about Snowden and asylum.
Okay, but I just want to make sure that because there is often,
Let's see, the last meeting took place Friday evening. I'd have to check if there was another contact in the last few days, but it's fair to say in the last couple of days.
and you can say 100% that there is no difference in the message that you're presenting publicly regarding your desire to have Snowden return to the United States. There's no difference between that, what you're saying to us, and what you have told the Venezuelans in private. There isn't any kind of wink or nod going on. There's no way that they could have misunderstood and not, there's no way, do you believe that there's any way that they could think that you don't really want him back, or that it might not have a deleterious effect on the relationship if they took him in?
It's hard to see how.
Okay.
I think you understand. On
And I'm getting the hook
yeah.
here in a moment, but go ahead,
Very
Said.
quick. Was there like a time limit on the offer by Venezuela? Somebody said the offer expired, or the deadline has passed. When you talked to
I would point you
Venezuela-
to the Venezuelans. I didn't see one.
But right now, you think that this is, I mean, even though ultimately he would have to go to a country like Venezuela or
Mm-hmm.
someone else, you still think that this is in Russia's hands, whereas they have the potential to send him back from this transit area.
Certainly, and
Is
if
that-
he were to be transported anywhere else, other countries would be involved, which is why we've been in touch with a broad range of countries across the world.
But I mean, in terms of your discussions with Russia, do you
Mm-hmm.
feel that this is still a kind of productive dialogue, or have you kind of much just chalked it up that the Russians will, let him go wherever it is that
No,
he
we
can
still
get
feel
asylum?
it is productive. You've seen the statements by, I guess it was, the last one may have been last week, by
Well, the
President
statements
Putin.
were that they'd like him to go. They didn't say anything encouraging.
They did
about,
say they didn't want this to impact our relationship. There are a lot of issues that we work together on,
But is there
they
any-
still have the opportunity to do the right thing here. Absolutely.
If they say they don't want it to impact the relationship, but if they do anything other than send him back to the United States, is that going to impact the relationship?
Well, I don't know what that would be, so it's hard for me to speculate on that.
Well,
Obviously,
isn't the only option really to send him? To send him back to the United States. Otherwise, anything that would help him get asylum would impact the relationship. is what-
certainly that would be a step that we would take into account as considering our relationship.
Two small quick
Yeah.
things. I think you're aware of the tweet that was put out by a Russian lawmaker
Yes,
and then taken down, saying that Snowden had accepted. Do you have any reason to believe that that is accurate, that he has accepted an offer?
I don't have any way of knowing what Mr. Snowden did or didn't do, so.
Great. And then secondly, the note about Mrs. Hines Carey's improvement in her condition said that the Secretary will briefly travel to Washington today for the opening. But the opening is tomorrow, so he'll be here today and stay at
Well,
least
as you know,
through
I
tomorrow.
think Matt referenced this in the
Sorry.
beginning that he had planned to host a dinner.
Got it.
Can, hold on a second.
Okay.
I got one more on
Sure.
Snowden here. Earlier today at the OAS, a French diplomat, a very young French diplomat, I might say, said that the French government had in fact revoked permission for President Morales' plane to go, but he said that it was a technical error based on a misunderstanding. Do you, in the United States government, have any idea what that technical error, that technical reason that was based on a misunderstanding or an incorrect assumption might have been?
I don't.
Any reaction?
Yesterday I asked you a follow-up about Snowden possibly being in possession of a second U.S. passport. I'm holding here a diplomatic note that was released in The Guardian over the weekend, and it says that Snowden, this is your diplomatic note, says Snowden may be in possession of another U.S. passport, number 018111064. Is there any follow-up on that?
I just don't have, I'd have to check on kind of exactly how it works. If your passport is revoked, does it mean you can use a different
You
passport?
previously reported lost or stolen, so maybe this is a sign of premeditation, perhaps?
I don't have any analysis on that for you, or any validation of that actually being fact.
passports, so you would know that if he had two, right?
I would have to check on,
Can you
on the
check?
actual. I'm happy to check if there's more we can share.
Also, on Benghazi, Jen, as you know, you've gotten a look at a book excerpt that appears in the August issue of Vanity Fair concerning Benghazi. The author appears to bring a wealth of new detail to the timeline of events for the night of the attack on the consulate. Their chief conclusion seems to be that the attackers enjoyed detailed knowledge, quote-unquote, of the consulate's layout, even to the point of knowing where the gasoline cans were located, all of which suggests that this terrorist attack was much more premeditated and carefully thought out than has previously been understood. Does the department dispute any accounts of this?
Well, I'm aware of the article. I haven't read the article, and there hasn't been any analysis of the article. As you know, our official account of the events from that night is in the unclassified ARB report. This article seems to draw heavily from that. In terms of other details that don't correspond with it, I just don't have anything further for that.
And based on what we know now, including the details amassed by these authors, Messrs. Burton and Katz, how much premeditation do we believe the Benghazi attack benefited from? Where did the intelligence possibly come from them to know where this stuff was?
Again, I'm just not going to have a further comment on a situation that you know is being looked at, that's ongoing,
Right,
and we've already
and
put out an unclassified ARB report accounting the details of the
And when
event.
Secretary Clinton famously asked about Benghazi, was it because of guys out for a walk one night and decided they would go kill some Americans? This article clearly suggests that that was not the case and that the consul was under careful observation for some time. Can you comment on that and maybe about outsourcing security to other host nations?
This has all been addressed, and
Maybe you should put that quote in context.
fair enough, but it's all been addressed in the ARB report. One more, go ahead.
Homs. I mean, the regime has been bombarding Homs nonstop for days now. And the administration a few days ago has asked the world community, the ones that have friends to the Bashar al-Assad and his regime, to talk to them to have safe passage for the humanitarian
Yes,
aid
that's
workers.
right.
Has any of this happened? What do you think is going on in Homs, and how do you see things unfolding in the near few days?
Well, you are absolutely correct. Of course, the fighting continues on the ground between both sides. You may have seen the UN estimates that as many as 4,000 civilians remain trapped inside the city without food, water, electricity, or medicine. Our understanding is that remains the case. And we are very concerned, as the UN and others are, about the inability for humanitarian assistance to get through. Thank you. I think we're done, but we can come over here. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jen.